Welcome. I'm Nereus and I'm one of the MOOC on Digital Youth Work facilitator. And today we have a special guest, Barry, who is joining from Ireland to speak with us and share all good practices you have collected and created with using VR in youth work, in youth work context. We are really pleased to have you here today. And we hope really to enrich our learning opportunities on the MOOC on Digital Youth Work. So Barry, the screen is yours and we are super excited to welcome you here.
Thank you, Nereus, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you also for the opportunity to talk about our VR Auriga project that has been ongoing for over 2 years now. So hopefully this slideshow will introduce how we've been using virtual reality in youth work in Ireland, and how indeed more recently it's become much more of an Irish conversation. It's becoming a global one with lots of really exciting and interesting conversations with people like Nereus and lots of other people from different parts of the world. So before I go into the main content of the slideshow today, I'll introduce myself. My name is Barry Haughey. I'm a senior youth officer and VR developer for Foróige. Foróige is Ireland's largest youth organisation. We have around 500 staff members, and we work with about 50,000 young people each year. We also have volunteers. We have about 5,000 volunteers across Ireland. And we have about, I would say we've got about 200 sites, projects across the country in different parts of the country. My background, I've worked in youth work for about 16 years. I'm a teacher. I trained as a secondary school, high school teacher. I'm also a digital artist. And the interest in kind of digital and creativity certainly shaped the idea that came from that we got VR, the VR Auriga project from, because as an artist I had been using virtual reality for maybe about 3.5 years, and when the pandemic struck, I realized there was an opportunity to do something really exciting with the national lockdowns that we found ourselves in Ireland. So what you'll see on the side there, you'll see our Foróige logo. Foróige, as I said, is it's the largest national youth organisation in Ireland. And it's an Irish word which means for development of youth. Basically, it's a kind of a word that was created 70 years ago when Foróige was established, and it kind of loosely means for development of youth. You'll also see a couple of characters there. So the person with the blue skin, that's me. That's me in Altspace, and that's how I've been kind of my avatar has been for the last maybe 1.5 years. So we would have certainly staff members in Foróige and certainly young people who would only know me as this avatar, because we only connect using VR and virtual spaces. The other person in the bottom left corner is my other avatar for another platform that we use called Rec Room. And again, we have a number of young people who would only know me as that avatar, which I think is quite an interesting scenario in itself. At the minute, we have 20 young people as part of our national VR group. So we have demonstrated that we as a youth organisation can connect with young people regardless of where they are in the country using VR. So we have young people who are living on islands off the west coast of Ireland in the Atlantic, as well as young people who may have a disability or an anxiety that might prevent them from joining an offline club. So the VR youth panel meet every week, and I think that panel and that group of young people is a very interesting one, because I think going forward they would represent how we can and how we should be thinking about connecting with young people in the coming years using this type of technology. So there will be time for some questions at the end. Nereus did send over some questions, which I hope to kind of talk through. And if there are any questions in the meantime, please feel free to kind of add them to the chat box. I'll try and do all I can to answer. So this is kind of the story so far in terms of what we're doing with VR and immersive technology, and certainly some ideas and opinions and where I think this is going through the filter of youth work and working with young people in education context. So there's a lot of kind of like jargon. There's a lot of kind of abbreviations thrown around at the minute around like everything from kind of this idea of the metaverse to VR and AR and XR. And I know even myself, I get quite like kind of overwhelmed a little bit. Like, what is this? And you know, what is all like? Isn't VR just a pair of goggles and you put them on and off you go? And that is to some extent what it is. But VR is virtual reality, as we all probably already know. And VR is a very rapidly evolving technology at the moment. Oculus, as we all know, Oculus, Meta Quest. Oculus was bought over by Facebook back in the kind of mid 2000s, I think it was, maybe 2015, I think it was. And the Oculus was developed by a person by the name of Palmer Luckey. Out in California. So Palmer developed the prototype when he was 17 in his mom and dad's garage in California. By the time he was 21, Facebook bought it off him for $2.5 billion. So Palmer became, he kind of, he went from being that kind of nerdy kid to being like a billionaire over the space of a few years. And that back then it was interesting because I think back then Facebook already had ambitions for this type of technology and what they're going to do and use it going forward. So it was no surprise to me that they rebranded last year as Meta and they're building out this idea of the metaverse, which is really exciting in some ways. It's also a little bit worrying in terms of maybe Facebook trying to monopolize this whole space for themselves, which is impossible, in my opinion. Also, I think in Europe they're hiring like something like 10,000 people to kind of help build out this idea, this kind of vision of the metaverse. So I think what I'm hearing and seeing is that we are still very much at the beginnings of this whole idea of being able to kind of have a digital layer to our offline worlds, and I think if we can kind of, as educators and youth workers and teachers, if we can understand how we can kind of harness this technology, it'll be significant in how we work and how we will connect with young people in the coming years. So there is a little bit of, it's very early days, but within Foróige, we've been using VR now for 2 years, two and a little bit years. And the more evidence that we see in terms of how we can connect with young people in these spaces, the kind of more, the more we kind of apply our attention to continue doing this. That's a little bit about VR. AR is augmented reality. Augmented reality, two really great examples that I would use would be Pokemon Go. We're all familiar, I'm sure, of Pokemon Go. You hold up your phone and there's an augmented character that a Pokemon character that you have to collect. Additionally, you would maybe have the IKEA app where you could augment a piece of furniture into your room. And that piece of furniture, you can kind of change color and the size and all that kind of stuff. So there are some examples of AR. AR is going to be a lot more, I suppose, in our day-to-day lives in the coming years. I think we're going to see a lot more of AR with maybe advertising, and maybe rather than phones, we might be using kind of glasses that have some kind of a smart lens or in that kind of that object. So AR could be, you know, objects like advertising or street signs could be augmented in digitally into your device. Mixed reality, XR, is still a work in progress. You'll see there the bottom right hand corner, there's a gentleman there with Microsoft's HoloLens. And that's the kind of the first kind of device that is being used in the mixed reality kind of context. We're seeing kind of higher end industries such as surgeons and maybe architects that are starting to use mixed reality for training purposes. And it would be kind of still very much in its infancy. Mixed reality, I think, could be where this immersive technology revolution could be where it lands, where we will find ourselves using a device similar to the HoloLens that would be able to kind of augment content and fully kind of immerse yourself into different environments using that particular device. It's still very expensive. I think the HoloLens comes in at around 4,000 euros at the moment. So that's kind of out most people's budgets for sure. But again, if you kind of look at the evolution of the smartphone, it'll get cheaper. There'll be more choice. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a lot more kind of accessibility to this type of kind of technology. And again, going back to this idea, if we can kind of evolve from this point forward with this technology, it's going to be really exciting in terms of what we can do within our own organizations, but certainly what we can do collectively as neighboring countries and friends and colleagues across not just Europe, but the globe. And that conversation is already starting to happen to some degree. And then I'll go back to the metaverse. As far as I can see, the metaverse isn't quite here yet, but we have the kind of the seeds of it starting to happen with this kind of Facebook's kind of ambitions for the metaverse and technology such as VR becoming a lot more kind of accessible to households. I think we're going to be increasingly offered metaverse options for our everyday kind of activities. It could be entertainment, it could be retail, it could be work, education. We are going to be able to, using the metaverse, we're going to be able to go shopping in a metaverse mall, for example, and the objects that we buy there will be shipped to our door. So that's kind of like where it's going. We're not quite there yet, and a lot of people are looking around for this metaverse, and it's not quite here yet. So that's probably why there's some confusion. But certainly, as I said, Facebook and rebranding to Meta, I think it's really interesting how much they're nailing their vision, their future vision to this technology, and they're investing billions and billions of dollars in this. So it's quite exciting. I'm also a little bit worried about it being very Facebook kind of centric. And it be kind of like, I suppose Facebook are trying to make the metaverse theirs, when in reality it's going to be very similar to the internet. You know, they'll own some of it, or they'll have a Facebook layer to the metaverse, but there's going to be lots and lots of other options and other places that we can go rather than just in Facebook. Moving on to digital trends. And I think the digital trends aspect is what has helped me kind of sell this idea internally to Foróige, and looking at where young people are using digital technology at the moment and where they're going. So at the moment, according to Statista, we have around 3 billion gamers worldwide. And those typical games would be kind of, you know, your Fortnite, your Minecraft, the Call of Duties. You've got your Xboxes, you've got your PlayStations. You know, we all know these different consoles and platforms that are very, very popular. Most of all of those are now looking at immersive technology as the next chapter in what they offer. So if you look there at the bottom, we have PlayStation, and they're ready to launch their 2nd generation VR this year. It would be very similar to the Meta Quest. And with that, they are launching 20 of their games as VR. I'm not sure what those games are, but I think that's a real interesting kind of development in terms of where a huge organization like PlayStation sees their future, and how young people are going to be accessing the very popular games that they're currently accessing in 2D. The one thing that I always point out is, if we're looking at this technology being very much more of a household item in even 2-3 years time, and educators, youth services, you know, and everyone who works with young people to some degree, if we can kind of even just cut our teeth, if we can just start exploring how we can connect with those young people and have a digital layer or an immersive layer to how we connect with those young people, the activities we do, the conversations we have, I think it's a really, really exciting time for what we'll be able to do collectively and within our own organizations. The need for us at the moment within Foróige, we loan young people the headsets mostly to take part in our activities. I think the need for us to do that in the near future is going to diminish rapidly, because I think maybe Santa Claus will be bringing lots of these kind of maybe PlayStation VRs this year, along with maybe the Meta Quest. Already, actually, in the last 6 months, I've started to speak with more and more young people in Ireland who actually have access to their own Oculus equipment, which would, like, that's a new development, and I think I could see that trend starting to happen more and more over the coming months and years. The other thing as well is with trends and the way this technology, this immersive technology is starting to evolve, there is some suggestion to say that it's going to be as popular as smartphones by 2025. Certainly, if we look at, there's an example there over in We've got the Pico, which has just launched recently. The Pico would pretty much be the Meta Quest without the Facebook element to it. It looks like the Meta Quest, and you don't need a Facebook account. That is just the first kind of rival to the Quest that's at the market at the minute. I would say there's maybe 2 or 3 of those that are coming down the track in the next few months, every year or so. So they're going to become a lot more popular. And I think you're also going to see a lot of you're going to see a lot more options in terms of like multi-user, creative spaces and apps that we can use using this technology. Lastly, we have Apple. Apple are ready. It's heavily rumored that they're going to launch their device this year, if not early next year. So you've got Apple, we've got Facebook, we have PlayStation, we have Hewlett Packard, to name just a few of the big kind of hitters, the big corporations that are starting to look at this kind of technology. With each one of those that joins the market, you will start to see this technology becoming a lot more popular, a lot more accessible, and what we can do in there, it will increase more and more with each kind of device. I'm going to talk a little bit about Altspace. Altspace was the first platform that we kind of used within our pilot within Ireland. We had we did a pilot. I'm going to talk about the pilot actually after this slide. But Altspace basically is a multi-user social platform. It was founded in 2013, and acquired by Microsoft, I think in 2015, I think it might have been, when it was about to go under. Altspace back then was way ahead of the curve, a little bit too far ahead of the curve. And people just didn't understand why they needed to go to a VR social platform. It just wasn't something that people understood because of the lack of access to technology. What we found immediately when the pandemic hit was that for this platform, we were able to kind of establish meetups within staff members. So we could, rather than having a Zoom call, which we all got very tired of very quickly, we could actually do some upskilling and kind of learning as we met. So we were able to kind of meet up in Altspace as colleagues and go and explore the idea of using Altspace as a youth space, basically. Some of the key features within Altspace are we can kind of set up private events, private groups. We can bring in our own content. So if you had like an itinerary, or if you had a group contract, or if you wanted to bring in a quiz, as long as it's a JPEG, you can upload that onto Altspace and then bring it into that 3D immersive environment very, very, very easily. And for that reason, we were able to kind of explore and experiment with Altspace within our staff team. And then indeed, it led to a pilot, which I'm going to talk to you about in a little minute. Altspace, as I mentioned, was acquired by Microsoft. Microsoft now, up until maybe about a year ago, Altspace was people were just they were still kind of figuring out what it is they can do in there. Within the last year, Altspace has just exploded in terms of what type of content you can access in this platform. Think of it as like a digital city. You could also argue this could be the start of the metaverse. Altspace could be the first building blocks of the metaverse starting to happen, because at any given time, we could go into Altspace and there could be a stand-up comedy show, there could be a workshop around STEM and STEAM learning, there could be a church group, a meditation group. These are all very typical live events that are hosted on Altspace at any given time. And certainly, as I said, in the last 6 months, 6 to 12 months alone, the amount of variety of different types of events, workshops, conversations that you can access in there has just grown phenomenally. And continues to grow as well. So I mentioned our VR pilot. Our VR pilot came from my interest in virtual reality as an artist, and using it during the pandemic, the early stages of the pandemic, as an idea to explore outside of Zoom. Everyone was very sick of Zoom within the staff team, and I was like, maybe we could try something with Altspace. Maybe we could do this, maybe try that, and maybe as a staff team, we could then explore the idea of a VR youth group. So that was back in maybe around this time, over 2 years ago. And that's what we did. We just, with a number of staff members around Ireland, we just started to look at Altspace, multi-user kind of events, meetups, and we took it from there. We couldn't figure out back then, there was very little content around documentation and manuals. You just had to figure it out yourself. So we could not, for the first while, we couldn't figure out how to make these events private. So we had lots of different events just with staff members where we opened an event and it was an experiment to see how many kind of strangers showed up to events back then. And in under 5 minutes in one of these events, we had 16 strangers that just showed up just because. So that was very important learning for us, because we needed to fully guarantee that each meetup, if ever there was young people in these meetups, it needed to be private. We needed to look at Altspace as we would of a youth project in the real world or offline. We needed to make sure that there was staff members in charge and someone was registering people as they arrive, and everyone who was there was registered to be there. So the pilot, we went live back in September 2020, and we had an hour-long VR meetup using Altspace, and basically we had like 40 young people and 20 staff members and volunteers. It was chaos. That's the only word. It was absolute chaos, because once we had guaranteed that these events were private and it worked, we distribute the headsets to young people across Ireland. You can see in the map of Ireland there are the different pins where the young people were dropping into this event or these events from. If you want to take note of the ones, there's young people off the west coast of Ireland as well with the purple pins. There was young people from care homes. There was young people in care, caring for sick parents. We had young people who were disabled, who were isolated. So in terms of a demographic of young people from Ireland, we really had young people from all parts presenting with different kind of challenges, be it because of where they lived or physically and everything in between. So we got 40 young people signed up. We got the equipment loaned out. We got everyone trained up together. So staff members in each region were trained up, and then they trained the young people in how to download Altspace, how to set up their avatar, and how to join the event. It took a little while, but we got there. On September 2020 is when we went live. It was a Thursday evening. I was the co-host. It all worked. Everyone dropped in. We were all avatars. The first thing that immediately struck me was, this is working brilliant. Now what? Now what do we do? Oh, shoot. They're going to ask me loads of it. And I was kind of, there was a moment where I was like, what are we going to do? How's this going to work? And what I went to was back to the first page of being a youth worker. So name games, icebreakers. We managed to hide different artifacts around the space, and we asked the young people to find these artifacts. If they were able to find the first 3 artifacts first, they got a prize. We mailed the prize. It was chocolate, and we mailed the chocolate out to the young people the following day. So what we found quite quickly was that youth work and connecting with young people could happen quite easily in these type of 3D immersive environments once you got through the initial stages of being new to VR. It became very, very natural, very, very quickly. The other thing that was really interesting was things that we didn't realize were going to be useful for young people, was that they started exploring how their avatar looks. They started getting creative with their avatar. Like, they were showing up with all sorts of cool haircuts and different kind of clothes. Their avatar, the skin color was different. So immediately we could see that this ability for young people to explore their identity in VR was very, very interesting, as well as connecting to each other. We had young people, as I mentioned, from different islands off the coast of Ireland, and they live in very similar environments, but they have no idea that the young person who lives 100 miles up the coast is living in that same kind of community, but in a different island. So we heard them connecting. We heard them talking about how they get to school and the weather there. And then we also heard this kind of musical element. So young people started to kind of write songs together. They were doing this beatboxing, using their mouths to kind of make beats. And this was all kind of happening organically. Bearing in mind that Ireland was in a lockdown, there was no one else meeting. We weren't allowed to leave our homes. So it was a very profound moment. And certainly for me back then, it was where I really realized there was something here in terms of what we could do as a youth organization and the need for us to be in these digital spaces going forward. So that was the pilot. And I suppose that was kind of where this really all started. And from that point to now, it's just been gathering momentum and interest. And yeah, as I said, Altspace is kind of like the first step of a space that we've been using for youth work. We now have around 10 different environments, experiences that we can use for youth work. I would say by maybe this time next year, it'll probably be 20, just because how much content is being produced and the different experiences that are being made available. Oh, the last thing really with the VR pilot was one of the main points really was what we had to do. We had to adjust our very stringent safeguarding documents that Foróige would have. So if a young person was joining a club or a project within Foróige, they would have to go through like a consent form. They'd have to be registered, signed up. So we had to kind of adjust those forms for VR. So we had to look at the virtual environment as if it was an extension of a Foróige club somewhere in Ireland. And that was something that we had to do first, and then we would send that out. So, and that would still be in place for today. Young people, even if they're existing members of Foróige, we would have to register them to a VR group, and we would look at that VR platform as an extension of a real world offline space that Foróige would be hosting. So the question that I would get pretty much on a daily basis would be why are we looking at VR? Why are we encouraging young people to be in these spaces when we want them outside in the sunshine? And that's a really great point. It's a really great point, but we need to look at where young people are, and certainly where young people are going to be. I think personally, the need for us to connect with young people digitally first, and then bring them offline for offline activities. I think that skill set is going to be increasingly in need going forward. We're going, as educators, as youth workers, we're going to have to establish and upskill ourselves in how we can use not just VR, but how we can use digital spaces to connect with young people and bring them offline, but meeting them offline or online first to do that. The other thing is digital trends. I mentioned as well about the different apps and the platforms that are being developed. I think that's going to be a lot more accessible to young people going forward. In addition to that, the future skills learning that's embedded with all of our activities is significant, where young people are getting the device, they're setting up an account, they're learning what it feels like to be a VR, an avatar, a digital citizen, how they're communicating and connecting with other young people and staff members around the country. These are all very, very important skill sets going forward. And I think this type of kind of procedure will really benefit the young people that we've been working with in VR going forward. The other thing that we've learned is VR and VR youth workspaces, it's a blank canvas. So young people who maybe have been traditionally overlooked, like young people who may not have access to a local Foróige club because of where they live, or because they might have a disability, or they live on an island, or they have an anxiety. We know if we can sign them up and loan them the equipment, then they can join us. We can go to them. They can stay where they are, and we can bring the youth service to that young person. And that's really powerful, because there is this kind of traditional group of young people who may not have ever had the opportunity to connect with a youth worker, a youth service, a support group. And we have been demonstrating that we can do that now over the last 2 years, 5 years, not there yet. The other thing is where we are now within Europe, where we are now within Ireland, and more recently, there's conversations with different educators now in North America. It's becoming an increasingly global conversation. And I think within that, we're now being able to kind of demonstrate that young people from regions that may have never had the opportunity to have their voices heard will now have this potential to kind of join a European VR group or a global one, where they can maybe talk a bit about what it is to what it's like to live in the Netherlands, or what it's like to live in Azerbaijan or Ireland. You know, we are now looking at this kind of digital youth group, where digital VR global youth group, where the young people can be representing their not just their projects, but their countries. Finally, it's fun. It's really good fun. I'm not sure if everyone has had the opportunity to try VR before, but some of the apps and the experiences are absolutely amazing. They're so much fun. Added in that if you're maybe collaborating with a friend or a few colleagues, and you're working on the DJ app that you can see the larger picture at the top of this visual here. We've been working with Tribe XR now for the last year and a little bit, and Tribe XR is just absolutely mind blowing in terms of what you can do. So we can kind of like have musical collaborations when we're based in different parts of the country, and that's proven really powerful to connect with young people as well. In addition to that, we've had graffiti and 3D sculpting, to name just a few of some of the other spaces that we've been using, not just within the staff members, but also with young people. So creating a VR youth space, again, I'm going to go back to Altspace because that's our kind of that's where we've kind of explored this idea of a VR youth space to begin with. So it needs to be appropriate. It comes down to the three leading questions, really. The three leading questions are: one, is this platform, is this app appropriate? If it's overly violent or anything like that, or it's an over 18 space, then we don't consider it for youth work for obvious reasons. Secondly, you want to ask, is it multi-user? So there's lots of apps and games only one person can use at a time. So that's not really going to be much use if you're looking at a collaborative space. So it needs to be collaborative. And then finally, that collaboration space needs to have a feature where we can make it private. So if you've answered yes to those first three questions, then the app that you're looking at is suitable for exploration as a youth space. And that's a really exciting thing to be able to look at, because the amount of apps and experiences and games that are being created on a weekly basis is significant. So it's just like we can kind of bring in a tapestry of different experiences and activities, as long as they would fit the criteria initially. The other thing that you would do is, let's say you had an app that you were interested in for a youth project. You would maybe spend a bit of time experimenting and getting to know that app with yourself and with a number of colleagues. So you would go into that space, you would set up an event, you would make it private, and you would go through the motions of how, if it was a 3D sculpting experiment, for example, how would this feel with what would we do if there was young people here as well? So you would come up with that kind of, you build up your skill set before you would go live with a youth group. What we do within Foróige, even if the young people are already registered with ourselves, we re-register them for the VR group. And that's just to identify the technology we're using, what time we're going to be online at, what time we're going to finish at, all of this kind of finer details that you need to have set up before you actually loan out the equipment, and certainly before you host one of these spaces. We have had scenarios in the past where young people have pretended that we are still online and we're not, and they're like staying on VR space for another 2 hours or something like that. So we're always clear before each event when we're online, what staff members are online, what it is we're going to be doing, and importantly, when we go offline, when it's finished. That's all the information for every event. That's what we would furnish the young people and the parents. It's really, really important. So it's similar to if the young person was going to the youth project. They know where it is, who the staff members are, when it's over, and what they're going to be doing each time they go there. Very, very, very similar for VR. At the minute, our kind of guiding time would be around 45 minutes maximum. So we find with the current technology, the headset can get a little heavy and uncomfortable after about 40 minutes or so. So maximum time be around 45 minutes. Sometimes if it's an event, like a one-off event, you might make it 60 minutes just to allow people to arrive and people to leave after the main event of 40 minutes or so. And then you'd be planning within that 40 minutes or 45 minutes, you're gonna break it into maybe 5 to 10 minute blocks. So it could be like a name game, it could be a scavenger hunt, we could be playing a game of hide and seek, all in VR. But you're going to want to allow the first maybe 5 or 10 minutes as the drop-in time, the opening circle, how are you getting on, how's things at home, did you go to school today, all of that kind of like almost traditional youth work conversation can happen at the beginning, and then you kind of gather people in at the end for the last 10 minutes and things. So you'll find maybe 45 minutes will go past quite quickly, but it is really important to have a plan, what it is you're going to do, and who's going to host with you, and all of that kind of important itinerary set up beforehand. Again, every event that we do in Foróige is private, it's invite only. We look upon whatever platform we're using, be it Altspace, be it Tribe, be it the Graffiti app, it always needs to be private. We cannot and we do not bring young people to the open social areas. because we cannot stand over the content, and sometimes the content is inappropriate. Last, and I think that's everything. Yeah, so just trial and everything. I would like, it's the main thing really would be, if you're new to this as an idea in terms of youth work, I would just give yourself maybe 6 weeks. If you got a VR today, give yourself maybe 6 weeks to kind of get used to the technology yourself before thinking of doing any work with young people. And maybe within that 6 weeks, connecting with another colleague who may have the headset or a headset as well, and exploring together and building up your skill set. It will take a little bit of time. It's not just as easy as turning on a computer, unfortunately, particularly if you're going to be an educator in there. So where are we now? Where is VR Auriga now, and what's happening? So it is very, very exciting. We currently have around 43 sites around Ireland. It's going to head towards maybe 50 towards the end of the year. You can see like a little map there of Ireland. And I've also kind of mentioned that this has become already a global conversation with new friends like Narius within Europe. And there's several friends over in North America now that we're connecting with that are very, very interested in using this technology for youth work and educational purposes. For Auriga, and what we've done for the last 2 years across Ireland, that network and our learning that is embedded in that network is so easily scaled up. It's so easily scaled up. It's just a matter of internet connection and equipment. So what we can do is, and I'm more than happy, is to skill share, to connect, and to help other sites, particularly in Europe and abroad and farther afield in Europe, and how we can kind of look at this kind of collective European youth conversation, how we as educators can bring young people together. And could be digital exchanges, it could be networking, it could be lots of different ideas going forward with these new apps that are coming down the line. One of the things that we did last year, there was a global event for NIFTY. So it's the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. They're based mostly in North America, but we had an event in Altspace that hosted 30 young people from 10 countries. So we had 2-hour-long events where young people from 10 countries came to Altspace, and they had a networking opportunity. We had information boards about their entrepreneurial and business ideas, and we used that platform we had some guest speakers, we did some games, but ultimately young people got to look and see other young people from different countries and what sort of ideas and businesses that they're working on. It worked really well, and I'm excited in the future how we can do similar, maybe across Europe, maybe across the world again. But what we do know is that the young people really enjoyed it, and it's something that I think that we could look at going forward as other projects. We Rethink Ireland Digital Solutions would be a government funding strand that Auriga applied for last year. We were selected out of 300 candidates, and we are now heading towards the end of the year, where we've been able to demonstrate using VR we can connect as a youth service to young people who are traditionally overlooked, so young people from remote areas who may be disabled, but also young people who might be in hospital for prolonged periods. We are working towards demonstrating that we can bring the youth service to those young people. It's been hugely successful so far in terms of our target numbers and the interest that it's gathered across Ireland and abroad. So I think VR and our VR programs within Auriga is here to stay, which is kind of my learning at this point in time. I mentioned also our VR Youth Advisory Panel. We have 20 young people from 18 counties at the minute across Ireland, and we meet only in VR. We only know each other as avatars, and it works. Once again, we have young people who are like using our Thursday afternoon meetups at the moment to drop in as a place to kind of chill out after exams and after study, and those young people are already connecting themselves as friends within that group. I met one of the young people myself offline for the first time last week, and he had never met me before offline, and he was quite disappointed when I didn't have purple skin and a big giant mohawk. So maybe next time I'll have that for him. Again, there's lots of really exciting ideas and conversations happening at the moment, with Auriga also looking at digital youth workers who would be skilled in VR into next year and beyond, where we will have a network of staff members from different parts of Ireland who will be looking at that area and how they can bring young people into kind of digital and VR meetups. I think that's everything that updates on the VR Auriga 2022, and that's everything from me. Hopefully that was of interest. I am more than happy to connect with anyone who would like more information around all of this. There is my email. I also my username in Altspace is Barry for Auriga. And yeah, the last thing I wanted to show, if I've got like a second, Narius, we also have, so I talked a little bit about Altspace VR, but we have a number of other platforms and apps that we've been using for creative youth work. One is called Gravity Sketch. So Gravity Sketch is a 3D creative environment. It's mostly used by maybe architects and designers, but we're using it for youth work at the moment. So it would have a feature where you have a collaboration room of up to 4 people. So 1 youth worker and 3 young people. And some of the work that's happening in Gravity Sketch at the minute is absolutely mind-blowing. So at the minute, I have a video to show where we have a number of young people who are creating a character, a 3D character together in a VR space. Bearing in mind that these young people are from different parts of Ireland. I could just show you that. If I can just move that out of the road for a second. Let's see. So you should be able to see that. Can you see that okay? So here we have the avatars are represented by these kind of little VR goggles. So I think there's 2 young people working here on this model, okay? And then the vision, how we're seeing this, the camera, is the youth worker. Okay, so they have a 3D model that they've created, or they're creating, and what they're going to do is, so this is the Gravity Sketch environment that they're in, and they're all in VR. They're all joining from different locations. What they're going to do with this 3D model after, they're going to upload it to an app called Mixamo, and Mixamo has a database of pre-programmed movements for 3D figures. So they're going to upload this figure that they've collaboratively worked on to Mixamo, and they are going to code they're going to make this move a certain, like I think it's a dance, they're going to make it shuffle or something like that. So once they have brought it into Mixamo and they've made it, I think they can bring in a number of movements. So it could be like walking, jumping, dancing, back to walking or something like that. Once they have done that, they then can upload that, export that to Adobe Aero, and that this initial 3D object, which was stationary, then it's going to be a moving 3D object, and then it's going to be an augmented 3D moving object. And those young people are able then to bring it onto their phones and augment it into their environment, stuff like that. So that workshop is probably about 45 minutes. That's just one workshop that we are working on at the moment. So I'll show you some of them working in real time here. So they're able to, we have no sound on this, but they're able to talk together, and the youth worker is able to talk to them. So, and the level of realness to that experience is amazing. It feels like you're just working beside someone in a studio. It's free, as is Mixamo, as is Adobe Aero. Although the Adobe Aero comes with the Adobe suite, but the other Mixamo and Gravity Sketch is free. Okay. Let's see if I can get a version of the finish. So they're going to export that one. I think they have a bit of work to do still left on it, but you kind of get the idea. So we are doing demos in Gravity Sketch and Tribe, the DJ, and app. So if you're interested in learning more, or if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to help if I can. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Barry, for all this inspiring experience and sharing. Now, I think we are ready to meet in the virtual reality space. I hope we are moving from Zoom to somewhere else. All right. So any questions from audience? I have a few posts which people were earlier sharing. I think one was Jess from Uganda was asking if the VR gear may be accessible in this part of the world. I shared briefly that we are now collaborating with 2 partners in Nigeria and in South Africa, with whom we are looking forward to collaborate and perhaps see for solutions. And of course, every country has different realities. So I don't know what is your experience, Barry, on access to gear across continents, different parts of the world.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really, really great question. Unfortunately, we are seeing maybe some places in Europe would have less access to the equipment, and sometimes the price range at the moment would be a little out of budgets as well. So there is a little bit of we need to work, there needs to be some work in terms of access to equipment. I'm not sure in terms of actual countries and their access to the equipment specifically, but what I would say is that it's getting cheaper. There's going to be more choice. The ability to get maybe a headset that isn't over 300 euros in the next year or so is going to be here. So this is still very, very early, and the equipment still is a little bit expensive. So there are some countries that would maybe have a little bit more difficulty getting access to that equipment.
Thanks. Clara was wondering before you showed actual video, is it possible to draw together in the metaverse? So you kind of confirmed, yes, it's possible. There are different opportunities, and then what you can do with content and objects which people create, it's really a lot of things you can. Maybe to mention other types of collaborations on VR.
Yeah, so it's a really great question, and as an artist myself, it's one of the places that I first checked out. So there is a graffiti app called King Spray. Now it isn't free; it's like 14 euros. But King Spray offers a private event feature, and you have a multitude of different spaces that you can use. So there's a rooftop, there's a subway, there's a warehouse, and you can establish a youth meetup there where you're actually spraying a wall or a mural. You can stream that also to maybe Facebook Live. It's amazing. Like the quality, it's just how the paint meets the brick. It looks and exactly how the paint would maybe meet the brick offline as well. So there's also a free app called Multibrush, MULTIBRUSH. It's free. It was initially an app by Google called Tiltbrush, and Google set it free. They have stopped supporting it, and they've sent it out for developers to do their own thing with it. It wasn't multi-user when Google owned it. One of the first things that people did was make it multi-user. So I would, if you're interested in drawing in a 3D environment, check out Multibrush. It's absolutely amazing. Also, what we were looking at on the video was Gravity Sketch. Gravity Sketch is amazing as well, and that's free as well.
Thanks. Limeless was also commenting that it seems like a good experience for inclusion when you start mentioning how many and different young people could connect, whilst maybe in kind of physical setting that wouldn't be possible. I think one other thing to think about inclusion, that sometimes we think that maybe digital opportunities could be just an option where you have people on board, but I think what matters is really how this changes their lives in a way. Yeah. So for example, if you mentioned somebody experiencing anxiety when meeting people in person, would it somehow digital experiences help them to kind of overcome anxiety and then reconnect back to the real world? What you said, that one of the skills we will have to develop, connecting back from virtual worlds, online worlds to real worlds, which will exist to some extent for years, I hope. So I think it's also something to explore further on. What does it mean, inclusion, in terms of using VR, and how VR can really help to develop a different set of skills. Okay, looking further, yes. We have Anna, who is posting in a chat, sounds fantastic and very promising. Perhaps one day it will be an integral part of our work. Yeah, hopefully, yes, indeed. Sana is posting, do you have experienced any cases of trolling with these VR youth spaces? How do you deal with this?
Great question. All of our youth events in VR are private. Everyone is invited, everyone is registered to be there. So it's similar to an offline youth group, where if it was a classroom, only the young people who are on the list to be at that activity are in that room. So there might be some issues with maybe other young people saying the wrong things to each other, but that's kind of normal in an offline youth group. We do not bring young people to the open social spaces because of how inappropriate that they can be sometimes.
Yeah, just to confirm that Clara was asking if it's possible to get all the names to apps and links. So Barry already posted them, and I just promise to everyone that I will include these in follow-up email. Plus, we will add the video recording and links to different apps and software you mentioned. So it will be on the course as well. Any other questions, final questions before I let you go into conversations about potential benefits and challenges? So maybe last questions to Barry, if you have them, you can unmute or post in the chat.